Hey, you guys, this is Raven. Um, Today's subject is entitled As We Draw Near, Part 2, Be Steadfast. And I just want you to be mindful as you listen to this. Uh, Proverbs 3 5 through 7a. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. So I first want to say, my intentions of doing as we draw near, and as we draw near part two, and there probably will be one more, is to encourage, prepare, and provide you with information so you can make an informed decision, and to show you how we will be impacted by the events that are soon to come, maybe as early as the first 180 days of the next president, which will take off as January 20th of next year. So it's right around the corner. So what I'm about to share is very vital for you to hear because it will affect all walks of life, regardless of your political affiliation, your religious denomination, who, what you worship, your gender, your race. It will affect all. And of course, there has to be a major aspect that targets Christians who serve the Creator, the Father in heaven. From what I've read thus far, it's very clear to me that if one person takes office, most of it will not be made policy. If the other one wins, most, if not all, will be made policy. But the part that affects Christians can be made policy by either. And so this is something that you need to pay attention to. So this past Saturday on June 1st of 2024, I woke up to use the restroom and Mordecai, just came up in my spirit and I said, Mordecai. And I know Mordecai's in the Bible, but I'm like, I just woke up to use the bathroom. Why did Mordecai, pop in my spirit? And so out of fear of forgetting, if I went back to sleep and woke up, I may have forgotten about it. So I went on and turned on my phone, did a search right quick of Mordecai, and found, him mentioned in the book of Esther. And so I went back to sleep, and later on I woke up and I read the book of Esther, and this is relevant. And so the next day on June 2nd, I heard Pastor Jeffries speak of salt and how we're salt of the earth and how salt is a preservative. And so he was saying that salt won't keep meat from rotting, but it'll delay it. And so he spoke of America's inevitable demise, but how we can delay it. And so he used Nineveh as an example. If you're familiar with that story, you know that God was going to destroy Nineveh. But prior to that, he sent Jonah to warn them. And after Jonah preached, all the people repented, they fasted. All the people and the cattle, nothing ate, nothing drank anything. They fasted, and God saw that, their reaction, how they took heed. So he didn't destroy it at that time, but it was later destroyed. And so it was delayed. And so, as Pastor Jeffries is saying that, us being salt, we can preserve something and delay it. And so I found that most fitting, that it came on Sunday on the 2nd, because it's encouragement for this matter, and that this matter can be delayed depending on how we respond to it. This is a message that I shared with a few people in terms of, me writing something, it being probably one of the most important messages that I've shared thus far, and that it'll probably ruffle a few feathers. And so, and it made me very uncomfortable. And so, I just want to share with you what God has placed on my heart since May 22nd, which is the day that this started and it's all profoundly relevant. And so this writing is quite extensive, and it just continued to grow. So it's been hard for me to type everything, get it all together, and record it. But I realize I have to at least set the table, to start the conversation. And then I will do another one thereafter, God willing. And so I'm not sure what day it was. I think it was in the week of May 21st, somewhere after the 22nd. I asked God to show me plainly, because when I first read this story, I was like, I felt anxiety, and so I asked God, like show me where I'm absolutely sure about this. And so I get home, a Bernie Mac show comes on at midnight to 12:30. I watch it. The second one came on, and I was like, wow, it's on the subject matter. And right when I asked him to show me clearly, he shows me on the Bernie Mac show. And so anyway, I didn't know the title of it, and I ended up going on YouTube later looking for it, and I did find it. I didn't find it initially, but I prayed about it. God led me to it, and so I will share that as well. And then the following day, on June 3rd, as I've shared many times before I read the Bible, I pray and ask God to guide me to where He'd have me to read, and the Holy Spirit to give me the understanding so I know how it applies or how to apply it. And He led me to the book of Ezekiel. So on the left side, it was Ezekiel chapter 43, verse 21, and it ended on the right side at 45, verse 1. But in between there, when I got to 45:5, it referenced Ezekiel 2:5, but I'm going to share 5 through 8. So in Ezekiel 2:5, it said, and they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet shall know that there hath been a prophet among them. And thou, son of man, be not afraid of them, neither be afraid of their words. Though briars and thorns be with thee, and thou dost dwell among scorpions, be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. And thou shalt speak my words unto them, whether they will hear, whether they will forbear, for they are most rebellious. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat that I give thee. So later I will share the rest of Ezekiel and what I read and what I learned from there. But not only did God lead me there to tell me to speak anyway, contrary to possible backlash, but He addressed the very subject matter on the next page. So this showed me for certain that I was on the right track. I was supposed to go forth and speak what He has shown me, whether, as it said, whether they will hear or whether they forbear. And so that's where He read me, because I was like, should I do this? Should I say this? I was so uncomfortable. But He's saying, whether they will hear or forbear, go forth. So here I am. I'm not endorsing anybody or anything. I've learned not to choose evil. We've been conditioned to choosing the lesser of two evils when we just need to choose God and pray for discernment. If you haven't listened to As We Draw Near, I recommend you do so. I recorded that on May 20th, but on May 22nd, I ran across an article in the San Francisco Chronicle that I must share. As I said, all will be affected by it, starting in the U.S., whether it occurs within 120 days of the new president taking office or thereafter. It's coming, it's near. I strongly advise you to pray for discernment concerning the subject matters I'll be discussing, because it will challenge what many have been taught and led to practice, to include myself, but I had actually become more conscientious of it in more recent years. As we draw near, it's getting trickier. Things are being disguised a little bit more cleverly, and we really need to study more. So in Matthew 7:15 through 20 and Matthew 12:33, it lets us know that we could tell what manner of tree by the fruit it bears. People always quote 2 Corinthians 11:14, but not 13 and 15. So I just want to share 13 through 15. Excuse me. It says, "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works." In this day and age, the face of the predator has changed, which is why I created a T. Not everyone who rocks fleece is a sheep, because the wolves in sheep clothing are more cleverly disguised and know how to prey on our emotions, using the Bible, making you think they're a certain way when they're not. And we really have to be more vigilant and have discernment. And for the sake of many souls, I won't be able to shorten this. However, God willing, I will follow with a second one to finish up. But I strongly urge you to do your due diligence in researching these matters and pray. I also suggest you look at the length of the video so you can carve out time uninterrupted to listen to it. As we draw near, we are seeing how things really are getting real. I mean, what time it is right now with bills like HR 690, which I shared in the first As We Draw Near, that has been approved by the House of Representatives, and then the former President Donald Trump endorsing a Bible that is called the God Bless the USA, which includes the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and has the chorus to Lee Greenwood's song, God Bless the USA, and something that is called Project 2025 that the powers that be would like to implement in the first 180 days of the next quote unquote conservative president, which once you read it, you'll know what party they are referring to. While I was researching Project 2025 and reading a book that I will also share, one of them said American law will be above the Bible. If it was in the book, then they provide the resource that it came from that deals with the Vatican, that you will have to look up that particular document. So I recommend that you check out this book because it's very insightful, it's full of scriptures, and you will understand more clearly, upon doing your own research, using that as a tool. So over 25 years ago, between probably like 1991, 1993, I received a newspaper with my first and last name on it and my address, of course. And I had never seen this paper before. I've never seen it since. I could tell it was an independent paper, that it wasn't widely circulated. And whoever sent it obviously knew my name and address and wanted me to have that information. It has some information about the papacy, the Vatican, and some other things that I didn't fully understand then because I was a new babe in Christ and had been reborn around that time. Nowadays you can easily find people through Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, Facebook, Instagram, but all of these didn't exist then, not even MySpace. People was still using pagers and the hard copy of the yellow and white pages. So it was strange to me to receive this. And I'm like, who knows me or knows that I live here to send me this, And I asked a couple of neighbors, I was like, hey, did you get one of these? And they're like, no. I said, hey, did you get one of these? And they're like, no. And I was like, whoever knew who they meant to send it to. So anyway, the reason the paper matters is because it spoke of the day that is included in Project 2025, the subject I'm getting ready to share. I recorded as we draw near on May 20th, and I ran across the article on May 22nd. And so, as I said, in my flesh, I felt anxious. I had to go get me something to eat, just to kind of calm my nerves. And of course, I prayed. And so, I'm going to share excerpts of the article. So, of course, I want to provide you with the source. It was in the San Francisco Chronicle. It was dated Sunday, May 19th of 2024. It was written by Raheem. His last name is spelled Hossseine. His email is his first and last name. So it's Raheem.Hossseini@sfchronicle.com. And so I thought it was a trip that it was in the Sunday paper, because people really don't look in the Sunday paper like that, like they used to. They used to go in there to look, get coupons, look at the comics, but because people look at things on their phone, like they could have easily missed this. And it's not like mainstream media is going to broadcast something like this. They tend to like for it to creep up on you when it's too late for you to do anything about it. But obviously it was meant for me to see because I will share it. So I'm going to provide some excerpts from it, and I will highly recommend that you read the entire article and or look up Project 2025 yourself at project2025.org, as well as HR 6090 and the God Bless the USA Bible. Project 2025 is 920 pages. They allow you to download it, but like who wants to download 920 pages? Plus it's hard on the eyes trying to read it on your screen. So I read up to page 51. Then I just start skimming through, looking at all of the highlighted, titles so that I could find it more easily. I got up to 531, but it was late, so I shut it down. But then the next day, I ended up finding an article that, a YouTube video rather, that I will attach. And the guy mentioned the page it was on, but it was the wrong page. So anyway, I had stopped at 531. I continued to skim through it, and I eventually found what page it's on, which I'll tell you later as well. And so they also offer it as a book for $35. So I just want to, go over some things that was in the article. It was written by a group called the Heritage Foundation. It is comprised of the who's, people heads of financial institutions, Homeland Security, the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, the Treasury. I mean, just everybody, just everybody you could think of. They put together this. I guess it's a bill, perhaps, that they want, not so much a bill, but a suggestion that they want the next president to implement within the first 180 days that they take office on January 20th, 2025. And as someone who writes a lot, I was very impressed, like with the style of writing, how thorough they were. I mean, they thought of everything. I mean, it's a trip. But anyway, this past Sunday on June 2nd, I was thumbing through the channels, and I ran across this woman that was speaking about abortion. And when they flashed her name down, she's a part of the Heritage Foundation, who authored this plan. And so after doing some research on Project 2025, I discovered it was actually written and submitted in 2023. And as I read some of the 920 pages, I discovered that the group had put it together they said for the first time that this is the first time that they have done this for one event, which is unique within itself. Like, this is so intentional. So they put together suggestions of bills and submitted them they submit them to the incoming president. And so back in the day, right before President Ronald Reagan took office, they said he made 60% of their recommendations policy. No telling how much of this one will be adopted. But from what I've witnessed thus far, I have a feeling the majority, if not all, will be made policy if their candidate of choice wins. But the key thing that affects Christians, as I said, can be made policy under whoever wins. And so if you study your Bible, you know throughout there were kings in different sects who would come together, even if there were enemies, to come against Jesus and his elect. You know, trust me, all of this that I'm saying for a reason. It's all relevant. And they're going to attempt to make these things policy, as I said, for the next conservative, quote unquote, president who takes office January 20th of 2025. And so, as in the last video, I shared this. I want you to share this again. I want to share it again, rather, because it's very important, and it deals with what is going to happen. So it comes from Daniel 6:4. I'm going to read through Daniel 6:4-7. It said, "Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could not find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Then these presidents and princesses assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes and the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. We learned that he established and signed it, and that it couldn't be a change according to the Medes and the Persians, which do not alter." So in verse 10, Daniel hears about the decree, and the first thing he does is the very thing the king just signed that would be against the law. So he kneeled 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before God as he had done before the decree. In verse 11, the men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. You know, verse 12 and 13, they go tell the king. So you get to verse 14, and it sounds like, you know, the king regrets signing the decree, but he has to keep his word. In verse 15, the men remind the king that the law of the Medes and the Persians requires no decree nor statute the king establishes can be changed. So in verse 16, Daniel has to be thrown into the lion's den. But we see in verse 16, the king tells Daniel, "Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee." In verse 18, the king goes to his palace. He spends the night fasting. No instruments and music was played, as was accustomed for the king, and he couldn't sleep. Verse 19, the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the lion's den. In verse 20, the king cries out with a lamentable voice, saying, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions?" And we see in verse 22, Daniel telling the king that his God has sent his angels to shut the mouth of the lions, that they did not hurt him because he was innocent. And so, and he had done nothing against the king. So in verse 23, the king was exceedingly glad for him, and he commanded them to take Daniel out of the den and said, no manner hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. In verse 24, the king commands that the men that accused Daniel be cast into the lion's den. Not just them, but their children and their wives. That's a lesson, not to touch God's anointed. The same thing you set up for them, it awaits you. In verse 25, the king Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and tongues and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. In verse 26, I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and dominion shall be even unto no end. He delivereth and rescueth and worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who have delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. As I said, as we draw near, this law was set up for Daniel, who they knew was faithful to his God. Because they couldn't find fault or error in him, they knew he would pray. So they had the king set up an irreversible decree for 30 days where no one could pray, knowing Daniel would do just that. So notice in Daniel 6:7, who set this up? It was presidents, governors, princes, counselors, and the captains. And notice in verse 25, the king Darius wrote to all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. So this isn't one country, but throughout the earth. So now let's look at Daniel 3:1-2. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was threescore cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. In verse 2, Nebuchadnezzar sent together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province to come to the dedication of the image which he has set up. If you look at the titles, rulers can be kings, queens, those heads of the military, and presidents. It says governors, of course, governors. Captains could be in the military, the judges, the judicial system, the treasurers may include the Department of Treasury, Federal Reserve, IRS, bankers. It says the counselors, so counselors could be those who aid the president and other parts of the government. The sheriffs can include branches of law enforcement that enforce the law, of course. So this will prove to be important when you read Project 2025, which is composed of all the who's, which would include all of those areas in which I just read and some. So Daniel 3:4, you see that the people, nations, and languages are being addressed. They are told when they hear the music, they are to fall down and worship the golden image that the king has set up. In verse 6, we learn whosoever shall not fall down and worship the image is going to be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And this reference Revelations 13:15, which is where those who don't accept the mark of the beast, his name, or the number of his name will be killed. In verse 7, we see when all the people heard the sound of the music, all the people, nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image. So like in Daniel 6, some men saw Daniel praying, some went and told on the Jews who the king has set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. These are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king calls for them and asks them if it were true that they didn't serve his God or worship the image. In Daniel 3:15, he even gives them another chance to bow down with a threat of being thrown in that same hour into a burning fiery furnace, and says, and who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? You know, these kings and princes, and presidents are something else. They have no reverence for God. So in verse 17 and 12, it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image what thou hast set up. In verse 19, we see Nebuchadnezzar is hot. It says he was full of fury. He was so upset, he commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. In verse 20, he commanded the most mighty men that were in his armies to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to cast them in the fiery furnace. So in verse 21, they are cast into the fiery furnace, but look what happens in verse 22. Because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace was so hot, the flame of the fire killed the men that had taken Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In verse 23, they fell down bound into the midst of the fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar, in verse 24, was astonished, and he rose up in haste and said to his counselors, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They said, true, O king. He answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. So we threw in 3, I see 4. You bound them, I see them loose and walking. The men that you threw in that threw them in are dead, but I see no hurt in these. It just made me think of the NBA honoring the 6th man. I was like, how about this 4th man in the fire? So we look at verse 26. Nebuchadnezzar came near the mouth of the fiery furnace and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. In verse 27, it said, the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors witnessed this and saw that the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. What manner of man is this? The Son of God standing in the midst. I just thought of like people, when they smoke cigarettes, how it gets in your clothes, it gets in your nostrils, and even when they leave, it's still in your clothes and in your nostrils and even in your hair. Or like when you stand near a barbecue pit, the smell will be in your clothes. I remember this guy, he was a really good cook, and he used to cook like for the clubs, for the fire department and stuff like that. And he lived in the same apartment building as me. And I remember one day he got in my car and I could smell the barbecue all in his clothes. And my stomach started growling and knotting up. It was like that smell was in his clothes like cologne. And these brothers had no smell. Death, where is your sting? Even when we use a flat iron, you could smell the hair. Sometimes it is singed, but, their hair wasn't even singed. I even remember we had fires in a place called Paradise a couple of years ago, and you could smell it miles away. But yet, look at this, look at God, how amazing, to pull them out of the fire, standing in the midst. So now if you look at Daniel 3:28 through 29, we learn Nebuchadnezzar said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut into pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then in verse 30, we see that all three men of them were promoted in the province of Babylon. So we have examples where kings of the earth acknowledge the works of God, and that God is the God of he is the living God that does signs and wonders like no other, and they make decrees that no one can speak against the God of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if they do, they will be killed. But look at nowadays, they make no such decree, and they are still gathering together to come against God and his chosen. They say all manner of evil against God, and instead of promoting people like Nebuchadnezzar did, they're firing people. Most religious sects practice freely and are not condemned, and they still come together against Christians. All religious sects, they see Christians and true Israelites as a threat. The reason I say true Israelites, this isn't no Kyrie Irving, Nick Cannon, Kanye West type of reasoning, but scripture. And by the way, HR 690 will probably make this part of scripture illegal. But at any rate, I say true Israelites because there are people who are Jews inwardly, as we learn in Romans 2:28 and 29. It says, "For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God." Revelations 2:9 says, "I know thy works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." Revelations 3:9 says, "Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee." So that scripture is specifically telling us that Jews are Jews, and there are Jews that are Jews inwardly, and the circumcision is not of the flesh, but of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. And it's saying that though there are some that speak blasphemy of them, which say that they are Jews and are not. And then it says in the other scripture, which say that they are Jews and not and are not, but do lie. So people, I feel, have to realize that these places, these names, like such as Babylon, Egypt, and Jerusalem, aren't just places and people, but there are spiritual Babylons and spiritual Egypt and spiritual Jerusalems. So if you look at Revelation 21:2-4, it tells us of a new Jerusalem that comes from heaven versus the geographical place we know. So remember, the Bible is full of symbolism and many times gives a shadow of things to come. The natural often explains the supernatural. The ordinary explains the extraordinary. The physical explains the spiritual. And we see that throughout. And also realize that when people speak of doing something against Jews, whether back then or now, it includes those who were Jews inwardly, as mentioned in the scriptures I provided. So in Revelation 7:4, we learn of the 144,000 of them that were sealed of the tribes of the children of Israel. When people think of children of Israel, they think of the people in Israel. But who is Israel? Jacob was given the name Israel by God. So the tribes of Israel, Jacob, that represents his children. So if you look, you'll see Judah, Reuben, Gad, Aser, Nephthalim, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zabulon, Joseph, and Benjamin. and there are 12,000 from each of these tribes. So 12 children times 12,000 gives you the 144,000. So some people seem to focus on that number, but as I recently shared, the focus should be on Revelation 7:9, after which says, "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes and palms in their hands." This is why we don't need to get caught up and have unproductive conversation about who is and isn't a Jew. Some are inward Jews, and the new Jerusalem is from heaven. Is just like when the Bible speaks of the natural branches and the ones that was grafted in. This speaks of the Jews and the ones who became Jews. So if you look at, like I said, when Mordecai came up in my spirit, and I looked up and found in the book of Esther, if you look at Esther 8:17, part of it reads, "And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them." So some become Jews. So this is not in the flesh. So I mentioned earlier that when I woke up around 4ish on June 1st, Mordecai came to me out of the blue. And then, as I just stated, I looked it up. It's in the book of Esther. Upon reading it later that day, I discovered this book, like the scriptures I read in Daniel, dealt with a decree against Mordecai, a Jew, and to all the Jews. So the reason God showed me the Bernie Mac show when I asked for clarity and allowed me to hear Pastor Jeffries on the 3rd, and then drop Mordecai in my spirit on June 1st, is the time is coming when, as in Daniel 6:5 reads, and said these men, "We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God." So I want to get back to Daniel 6:4-9, and all the heads of these positions coming against God's elect. The first thing Daniel did when he heard about the decree, he prayed and made supplication. So I want you to listen to As We Draw Near, that I recorded May 20th. It's under 35 minutes, and just kind of, go over so you already know what that's about. And then be sure whenever you get ready to listen to any of my videos, not just this one, but read the description. Because I tend to provide extra, more scriptures. I attach other videos, and I provide additional information that'll aid in your understanding. And some of the videos I attach, they have some weird pictures or whatever. Not responsible for the pictures they use, and I continue to just ignore the pictures and just listen to the video. That way you don't miss the message, But anyway, I want to get into the article now. That I saw in the San Francisco Chronicle on May 22nd, which is dated Sunday, May 19th of 2024. And I will try to remember to put the picture of this article on the screen. And so there's a picture depicted of Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, holding what is said to be a Bible. Under the picture it reads, "Former President Donald Trump's God Bless the USA Bible is seen as linking to his mainstreaming of Christian nationalism." This particular picture of him holding a black book, it doesn't show Holy Bible on it, so I'm not sure about the book he's holding. But in the background you can see St. John's Church Parish House. And so in the article, here are some of the statements that stood out. One area is one of them I pointed out in the first As We Draw Near. And I pointed out earlier about the King James Bible, how he added the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the chorus to Lee Greenwood's song, God Bless the USA. Then it quotes Trump as saying, "We have to bring Christianity back into our lives and back into what will be again a great nation." I'm glad to endorse and encourage you to get this Bible. We must make America pray again. Remember, he said he had made saying Christmas popular again. So I'm sure he'll say he made praying popular again. And so the article goes on to define what Christian nationalism is. And I take it this is the author of the article's definition. So you might want to look up Christian nationalism as well. The article says Christian nationalism is a fringe but creepily influential ideology based on the idea that that God intended America to be an ethno-religious state controlled by European Protestants. So I hadn't heard that phrase before, so I looked it up. An ethno-religious group. It says an ethno-religious group is a grouping of people who are unified by common religious philosophy and ethnic background. It holds that the U.S. law should be based on evangelical interpretations of the biblical text and that American Christians should exercise dominion over other people in society. So another quote from the article, it says, from Trump, it says, in my first term, I fought for Christians harder than any president has ever done before. You know that. And I will fight even harder for Christians with 4 more years in the White House, Trump told the National Religious Broadcasters Association. I get in there, you're going to be using that power at a level that you've never used it before. In the same speech, Trump echoed the goals of Project 2025, an ambitious policy agenda for conservative administration's first 6 months in office. Now I'll continue reading additional statements right from the article. And here's where it gets interesting to me. So it says that it starts talking about, so it says coordinated by the Heritage Foundation and authored by an array of conservative organizations, including ones led by Christian nationalists. Project 2025 syncs closely with an evangelical agenda to enforce a binary definition of gender while ending access to abortions, contraception, and end-of-life care. Among its myriad policy recommendations, the 900-plus page tome calls for a Republican president to strip all legislation, federal regulations, and grants of language covering abortion, reproductive health, sexual orientation, gender identity, diversity, and other protections disfavored by the right. Another bullet, outlaw transgender ideology as pornography and imprison teachers and school librarians who educate students about it. Another bullet, require federally funded reproductive health clinics to provide information about the importance of marriage. This is what got me. It says recognize Sunday as a day of rest under Judeo-Christian tradition and require employees to pay workers time and a half if they work the Sabbath. It goes on to say Trump has also indicated he would move to institute religious and ideological tests for aspiring immigrants. And so this said he's trying to achieve the same goals as he did with the Muslim travel ban effort. So if you look at that one in particular, it sounds like he is going to have them take a test. If they're immigrant and they're aspiring to come over here, they need to take a test about religion and their ideology before they can come in. That's going to be a part of it. But this is the meat of it. This is what is a trip where it says recognize Sunday as a day of rest under Judeo-Christian tradition and require employees to pay workers time and a half if they work the Sabbath. Okay, so look at the calendar on the screen. I specifically took a month that landed, with the first landed on Sunday instead of me having to go through a number 1 through 7. I also placed Mark 15:42 on Friday, Matt 12:8, Isaiah 66:22 and 23, Mark 2:23 through 28, and then chapter 3, 1 through 6, and Luke 6, 6 through 9 on Saturday, and Mark 16, 1 and 2, Mark 16:9, and Luke 24:46 on Sunday, the 8th day. So please look at each of these scriptures. As you can clearly see, looking at the calendar, Sunday is the first day of the week, and Saturday is the seventh day, the Lord's day. In addition, throughout the Bible, we do not see the names of the days, only the months. Throughout Scripture, it may say to do something on the 14th day of the 12th month, or say the 10th day of the first month, for example. But they only tell you what number, and there were not names of the weeks. So where did the names of the weeks come from? So right now, it's been 50 minutes and I'm almost done. I set that alarm so that this writing isn't particularly long. And so I will stop here and then I will continue on the second one. Thank you. Hey, so I'm continuing the last video as we draw near part 2. Be steadfast. I stopped at saying when we look through the Bible, we see the names of the months in the Bible. We weren't seeing names of the days. And so oftentimes you would hear, do this on the 14th day of Adar, or do this on the 10th day of the first month. And then it would say what that month is. And they don't tell you, as I said, names of the days. They just tell you the number. Even sometime on the 23rd day of the 7th month, do this. And so where did the names of the weeks come from? And so, of the week, rather. So according to the almanac, the names of the week originated with the ancient Romans, who used the Latin words for the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets. According to the Merriam-Webster, the names were the sun, the moon, 4 gods, and a goddess. It further states in the 4th century AD, Emperor Constantine of the Roman Empire established the 7-day week we use today using 7 celestial bodies. Sunday, the first day of the week, was named after the sun. In Latin, it was called Dies Solis, so that's D-I-E-S, and then S-O-L-I-S, meaning day of the sun. The English word we use today is from Old English, and that's S-U-N-N-A-N-D-A-E-G, and that derived from S-U-N-N-E, which is sun, and the second word being D-A-E-G, which is day, literally meaning sun, space, day. The second day is D-I-E-S-L-U-N-A-E, which is day of the moon, in English, moon day. Tuesday was originally Mars, which was not only the name of a planet, but the name of the Roman god of war. Germanic people used the name of a Germanic god of war of Germanic mythology, which was T-I-W or T-I-U or T-Y-R to the north. In Old English, it's T-I-W-E-S-D-A-E-G from the name T-I-W-E-S-D-A-E-G. or TIU. So we say Tuesday, which is the same as saying it's the Germanic Gods Awards Day, because that's his name. So you're saying that's his day. And as you go on with the rest of the days of the week, we see they come from mythology, from planets, and from their small gods. So I put the list there of the names on the screen. I personally found this to be interesting because I had mentioned in previous videos how we use many names not knowing their origin, and how many people have always said kindergarten not knowing it was German. Just as most of us probably didn't know where the names of the week derived from, and never knew that they were after Roman gods or Germanic mythological gods. So I imagine if I hadn't lived in Germany, I probably still wouldn't know kindergarten was German. And so I'm learning through this, because I was never big on history, because I never really heard about my own history. I've only, taught at school about how other people conquered your people. So it was always like you were on the bad receiving end. So I never was big on history. So some of this is new to me, that the names of the week came from German. So in Germanic mythology or Roman gods, I wasn't aware of that. So anyway, recognizing Sunday as the Sabbath was one of the things that was mentioned in the newspaper that I told you I received over 25 years ago. This was like maybe from 91 to 93, somewhere around there, and it spoke of the papacy and it spoke of the Vatican. And so somebody was trying to bring this awareness to me in the early 90s. It was saying a divisive day would come where we would be forced to choose which day we would worship and rest out of Saturday and Sunday. According to the newspaper that was mailed to me, it said the day would point to the mark of the beast. I also heard a 7-day Adventist on the radio say this recently, that's what that is. So look at, again, Daniel 6:5 that I shared earlier. It said, then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Well, the law of our God says the Sabbath, this the seventh day. And that's clear when you look at Genesis. Before, we're not even talking about the 10 Commandments. We're talking about in Genesis when he made creation. You can see what he created on the first day, on the second day, on the third day, on the fourth day, on the sixth day, and it said he rested the seventh day. So that's 7 days straight, from the first day to the seventh. And like I said, you look on the calendar I showed you earlier, and actually September of this year coming up, the first lands on Sunday, the seventh lands on Saturday. They already have it numbered out. But at any rate, this, and I don't know, I've never considered this as the mark, but in highlight of all of what I've been researching, it could very well be. And this is for you to pray, for you to get discernment about it, because this says, then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. And so this Sunday, as the day of the Lord, worshiping on that day, observing it as the Sabbath, that would go against the Lord our God. So anyway, about 8 years ago, I was telling a friend that they had this African spot, a vendor, where you could buy African food on the weekend, right, at the flea market. And I was talking about how good it was. And she like, oh, I need to go down there and taste it, right? So she was like, how long are they open? And I'm like, I think they start shutting down around, this time or whatever. She said because she tries not to do anything before 6. And I was like, what's that about, right? And so she observed the Sabbath. And so that's from, 6 p.m. on a Friday to 6 p.m. on Saturday. So she was saying, in other words, if, she was to go, she would try to get it after 6 on Saturday. And so I'm like, what does that have to do? I really didn't get it at the time, but I mean, like I said, since May 22nd, I've been doing some research and some of this has come to my mind. So anyway, while I was talking to her, she said she doesn't buy or sell. And I was like, where is that in the Bible? Because to me, I've always known the Sabbath to mean a day of rest. Like you rest from all your labor, right? I didn't know anything about you not being able to buy or sell. I didn't know that was incorporated in there. So I asked her, where is that in the Bible? And she said she'll look and she'll let me know. So anyway, at different points in the game, I would ask her, hey, did you find it? No, we've been looking for it. I can't find it. So anyway, as I said, I pray and I ask God to show me because I want to know, because I want to honor God the way in which he intends for me to honor him. And it said throughout the Bible, those who keep my commandments. And so this is a part of this. So I prayed, I asked God, does this include buying or selling, or is it a day of rest, or show me where it is in there? So like I said, I pray, I ask God to guide me. I open the Bible. I'm in the book of Nehemiah in chapter 10, and I run up on it. Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 31. And after I read it, I text her and said, hey, it's in Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 31. And I had to look at that more recently because I remember it was in the book of Nehemiah, but I couldn't remember exactly where it was. But I remember that's where he guided me to. And so anyway, I ended up texting my dad as well because when she told me about that, I asked him, I said, do you know anything about like you can't buy or sell on the Sabbath, or is that just, But at any rate, and the reason I'm saying this, and you have to pray for discernment because some people think, oh, we don't observe the Sabbath anymore. We don't tithe anymore. This was for the Jews and this was for this. And it's like, if you study thoroughly, it's laid out for us to know. And I'm not going to tell you what to believe or what to do, but to do your due diligence and seek God for guidance and to ask him, But I'm going to recommend the same book that was given to me that I end up looking up. So anyway, about 2 years ago, someone gave me a book, and it's on the screen now. It's called The National Sunday Law. And it has some very compelling information in it. And it's filled with Bible scriptures to guide you throughout so you could do your research yourself. It mentions a lot of documents by the Vatican and the popes, and it gives you a history going way back. And this particular book, the copyright was 1983. So people long have known this divisive day was coming. The rest of us knew the mark was coming, but we didn't know what that looked like. We didn't know. Different times we thought it was this, different times we thought it was that. But anyway, I haven't finished reading the 920-page document of Project 2025. But I did finish reading the book on National Sunday Law on May 30th, and I'm still digesting everything. The only reason I started reading it is because I saw Project 2025 in the paper on May 22nd. In addition, upon skimming through the 920 20 pages, I discovered the page the National Sunday Law is on. It's on page 621, and I'm attaching that on the screen as well. If you can, you can pause and read it. If you cannot read it upon pausing, you can go to www.project2025.org and you will see like where it says 1 of 9/2020. And so you can go right where the 1 is and just type in 621 to go right to that page. And so I also noticed in recent years how Target and other places were closed on holidays. That used to be open for you to grab a last minute gift, or like a last minute grocery item you forgot. Or so we're seeing a shift. A shift has already begun to take place in the last several years, and it will ramp up. But as I said, this is from Project 2025. And this group who's of who's, like when you go to www.project2025.org and you start reading that document, it will tell you all the people that and all the agencies that were involved in putting this document together. And like I said, it is thorough, and it a lot of people will be upset just by the stuff I highlighted alone. But as I read it as a Christian, I'm like, okay, that's a good okay. But then when it got to this recognizing Sunday as a day of rest, that's the part I was like, skirt, that's the part that jumped off the page and made me realize how close we are, And so I strongly urge you look up HR 6090 and Project 2025 at www.project2025.org, and be sure to view the videos in the description, where one young man goes into great detail on the HR 690, and there's another video that goes into Project 2025 and what this Sunday law is, and many other aspects of the 920 page document. And as I said, you got to pray earnestly. Once again, this election puts us in between a rock and hard place, because under one, there's so much freedom to do whatever you want until sin abounds and many souls are lost. Under the other one, freedom of choice is removed from most, and Christians will bear the brunt for us of not observing or recognizing the Sabbath as Sunday, which, with this Sunday law. And so Joshua 24:15 reads in part, "Choose ye this day whom ye will serve." We're also told to choose the narrow path. So the word choose means we have a choice. We have a free will to choose, but policies are trying to be implemented to force upon us. But it is written, so it is what it is. We knew this day was coming. But John 16:1-2-3 says, "These things have I spoken unto you, that ye should not be offended. They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service." Verse 3, "And these things will they do unto you, because they have not known the Father nor me. And so recognize Sunday as a day of rest under Judeo-Christian tradition, and require employees to pay workers time and a half if they work on the Sabbath. So what they're saying is Sunday is the Sabbath. And we know it's the Lord's day on the Sabbath, and we know he is Lord of the Sabbath, and we know the Sabbath of the Lord is not Sunday. So this is where Daniel 6:5 come in. So I like to know in the comments what you guys think about Project 2025, what you think about observing Sunday as the Sabbath and the day of rest. Is this biblical to you? You know, please tell me what you think in the comments. In the description, I will attach a video on the HR 690 for you to listen to understand what's going on with that one. It's short, actually. I will attach the video on Project 2025, the Sunday law, national law that they want to implement. It's short as well for you to listen to. In addition, I would suggest you read the book National Sunday Law by A. Jan, last name Marcussen, and that copyright was 1983, and it's full of scriptures for you thoroughly to go through and understand what this means and who is to observe it. In addition, I will include like scriptures for you to take at, and I also will put the Bernie Mac video which addressed this also. And actually, if you go to the Bernie Mac show, the whole, if I was you, I would listen to the episode, which is probably like about 20 minutes, 21 minutes or whatever. But if you just want to go right to the meat of it, you could take your cursor and scroll it to the 14th minute mark, 25 seconds, and listen to like the 15-minute mark. So it's like under a minute area. All of it was really good to listen to, but I'm just saying, God, and it's a trip because, as I said, there's so much that's in this that I want to share with you, and I will share it on one more, how all of this came about. I mean, all of this isn't by chance. Like I said, I saw it on this article addressing it on May 22nd of 2024. The article is dated Sunday, May 19th of 2024, and it says Trump's stance leans to Christian nationalism. And I gave you his name, Raheem, last name Hossseini. And since I got this article and I've been contemplating on the video, I'm like, I gotta hurry up and get this out. This is urgent. But then I was like, wait a minute. Okay, he wrote this. He talks about Project 25. Don't take his word. Go look. So then I go to Project 2025's website and I find the document. And I start reading it for myself. Like I said, it's 920 pages. I don't know that I want to spend $35 to buy the book. I may, because there's a lot of stuff in there. If you want to skim through it, on on your computer, I will be using iDrop. That's a lot of reading to do on the screen. But at any rate, like I said, it's on page 621. And if that is the mark, and I'm not saying that it is, but you have to, this is not some obviously to ignore, whether it be the mark or not. They're gonna, I mean, we already experienced COVID, and they stopped shy of saying martial law, because if they said martial law, everybody would have like rebelled. But by them saying, for you to be inside a couple of days or whatever it was, or them urging or whatever, then people abided. But that was something that shows you what something like this could look like when they start enforcing things. We know a lot of people lost their jobs. We know a lot of people was fired, because they wouldn't accept the vaccine. So now we're talking about biblical proportions. We're talking about the mark of the beast. We're talking about them enforcing something that's contrary to God's word. So this is not something that can be taken lightly, and you're going to need to pray for discernment to know what this is. We definitely know as a Christian that's not something we should observe or recognize as that as the Sabbath, because it's clearly not the Sabbath. So that's a problem, and if it's a mark, that's very serious. And so if it wasn't, then it's still taking away what you would chose to do on a Sunday. That's the first day of the week. If you want to do something, you should be able to do it. But that's where the problem is going to lie for Christians and non-Christians, And also they recommend if you do work that you get paid time and a half. And so it's a lot to think about, because we've been accustomed to going to church on Sunday, on the first day, people working on Saturday, and we have always followed this pattern because it always been passed down through the generations. As I said, we never questioned the origin of things, how they started. But what made me know how important this video is, and how this topic rather is that it's in the paper in 2024, and it's something they want to implement within the first 180 days of the president taking office January 20th of 2025. This is their goal, for it to transpire in the first 80 days. And as I said, when President Ronald Reagan was in office, he made 60% of their recommendations policy. And so will this become policy within the first 180 days of January 20th? Is this something, like Pastor Jeffress said, that can be delayed through, fasting and praying in the salt of the earth, like in the book of Nineveh? And so it's a lot to digest, because you're going to have to make some hard decisions. Either way it go, if this is something that's implemented, it's a decision, a conscious, informed decision that you're going to have to make. And as I said, I received a paper in 1991, 1993, somewhere around there, trying to put me up upon this, talking about, like I said, the Vatican, the papacy, and this divisive day that would be the mark. And then when I struggled with it, like I said, uh, who would have thought I would have just came home and I'm watching a Bernie Mac show and it's 12 o'clock in the morning and I'm watching the episode and I was like, wow, because I asked God to show me very clearly. And then, as I said, when I struggled, like, people gonna have a problem with this subject. This is uncomfortable for me. God leads me to Ezekiel and says whether they will hear or forbear. You go say it. And so I'm saying it, you know. And then he put Mordecai in my spirit. And when I looked at that, there was a decree going out to kill Mordecai, the Jew, and all the other Jewish because he wouldn't reverence the guy. He wouldn't bow down to Haman. And what happened to Haman is the very gallows that he wanted to hang Mordecai and the Jews on. He and his family, he and 10 of his sons had to end up dying on the very thing he built to kill the Jews with. Just like the people who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they got consumed by the fire instead of the people they threw in the fire. Just like when they put Daniel in the lion's den, the people who told on Daniel, they had to end up in the lion's den. Not just them, but their wives and their children. You know, so God is showing me a lot with this particular writing. And like I said, I will consolidate the last little bit that I haven't and do one more. And just, you know, whoever's listening to this, if you know me personally, you could call me or text me or whatever and talk to me about it. If you want to comment in the comment section, feel free to do it. Share it with others. If you feel so led to do, open the conversation up, see what they think about it. But more importantly, and above all, you ask God. And so I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening. I hope you've listened to both of them. Because if it is what they're saying it is, it shows where your allegiance lies. And we already know the income for anybody who accepts the mark of the beast or his name or the number of his name. And so pray and go from there. I thank God for the message. I thank God for allowing me to see this Sunday's paper, this article where I learned about the project 2025 before the next year comes into play. It gives us some time to chew on this and wrap our heads around it and see what it all means. So anyway, as I said, I thank you for listening, and I recommend you do your due diligence and look up HR 690, Project 2025, the God blessed the USA Bible, where he added documents to it, which might set precedents for people to add additional stuff to it. And check out the videos in the description and look at the scriptures. And in addition, get you a copy of that National Sunday Law, because it lays everything out. It lays it out so thoroughly until you'll just know. I thank you for for tuning in. Amen.